Morning members. Today we're going to do one final video in our series of how to replant and some information that's been provided when it comes to growing seedlings. So quite a while ago I planted up some seeds of a whole different variety. We've got Varechas in this container, we've got Alcantarrhea in these containers, we've got Hyloceums in these ones. So these are the Neoregelia, which was recently last year reclassified. So ones like this particular species are very similar to pink spider. So if you looked up Neoregelia pink spider, you would see they grow on a stolon. This particular variety is the lavender variety, so it's Levianum. Probably didn't say that correctly. We'll just go with that. There's Neoregelias, so these are blood transfusion birds and bees hybrids, more Alcantarrheas, and some more Neoregelias, as well as a few others. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start the process very simply, and that's making our containers. So these containers don't have any holes in them. The seed is planted. These ones were planted anywhere from February last year, which is 12 months ago, back to October last year. So these ones are 4-month-old. So what we're going to do is, first of all, move them into the next containers. Now they're not going into pots yet, they're still too young and just too delicate to, and also just too much intensity in watering of them to keep them nice and moist and happy and growing at a really good rate. So they're going back into containers with lids on, but instead of these containers which I use for seedlings, I'm going to move them into a different container, and these containers have had the holes placed into them. Now you can do it a couple of ways. You can do it with a drill, but my favourite tool, don't tell my husband, is his this soldering iron. So with a soldering iron, I find it's much easier. This one's battery operated as well. It's Ryobi. It's a matter of simply just no effort at all, putting in as many or as few holes as I require. So for these particular containers that I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop in maybe, I don't know, we'll say 12 small holes. They're still going to have their lids on with these ones as they grow. The holes are for later on when they do move out to the bigger garden. As you see, easy to do. When they go out to the bigger garden and they get watered, I won't need to move them from these containers. These act like pots now, and they'll have their drainage holes. Now if you were to do them out without the drainage holes in a main garden where they get watered or with rainfall, the plants will drown very quickly in a couple of days' time. So this just gives us a little bit of drainage for when we need it. Now these are just little 650ml containers. The larger ones are double that again. So that's how we go about getting our holes into the containers. Really quick and easy. And I'll just turn off hubby's machine. We'll start the process. So the process begins with the potting mix. Potting mix, as I've said before, is the one that I make. So this is a combination of cocoa fibre, perlite and vermiculite, and some propagation sand. And on previous videos I've shown you how I go about making this, and you can search videos on the site to find out exactly what the mix is. And to this mix now is where we're going to add our seedlings. So I'm just going to fill up some trays and we'll come back so that way we're not going on too long. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a start. I've already done the first tray of these Alcantarrheas. This is a hybrid. This is Hawaiian form Vinny colour, the red one, and it's been crossed with a divine plum. They were planted back in October of 21, so it's only about 4 months ago. Still too small in my opinion, for them to go into individual plug trays and go outside yet. So they're still going to be treated as little babies, as will these next ones. So what I've done is I've topped up my containers, and because I'm doing, as I said, seedlings at Elcamp, there's some of the propagation sand mixed in with this mix. And on top of that, I've also added some additional fertiliser, slow release Osmocote Exact, just because I'm doing Elcant rays, and Elcants are big feeders, especially when they're this size. Now, this is the tool that I like to use when I'm doing any fine work. Elcants are a lot more forgiving, and they allow me just to pluck them out. So what we'll do is we'll simply, when to take them out, they need to be, these bottom leaves is the first row, and they need to have at least another row, in my opinion, at least this many. Any less or any more is good, but less is not good. So don't take them out when they're smaller than that, because they'll just get damaged, and it'll slow their growth down. So this is a good size for them to start to be taking out. They've got their second bracts or third bracts, and for me it's not too difficult with my nails, is that just to gently pick them up and move them and pop them simply on the surface of the mix that they're going in. They're not getting any more treatment than that, other than a little bit of a press down, just to make sure that they're not going to move around too much. And I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these trays of these particular ones. Now these ones are total orange hybrid, so they have self-pollinated their seed that was given to me by a friend who knows that I like to grow them from seed. And so these are the prodigy of his flower, which he sent to me back in October last year. So I know he'll probably be watching this, so you'll be able to see your little babies, and no doubt in time I'll end up sending you some of these back. Alright, so I'm going to keep going, and I'll do a few more of these and we'll come back. Okay, a couple of minutes later. Now they've all been pricked out. Now the reason that we're doing the pricking out is that they've been in the seed raising mix now for 4 months. So it's now depleted of all of its elements that were feeding those seedlings. So nice fresh batch of seedling mix with fertiliser in it to feed them for another few months. Also spacing them out a little bit more gives them a little bit more space. So from one container I've ended up with 2. That's probably only about 50 little seedlings, but that's enough for any little domestic garden, because these ones will all obviously mature at the same size. So lids go on, and they can go back up on the favourite windowsill, and they can continue to grow in these pots for another few months, just needing to be misted with some water with a little bit of Thrive, or with a specific Bromeliad fertiliser that you can actually purchase. Have their tags in them, have their dates in them. I'll do the same with these and get them out of the way as well, which is the Vinicolors. Now, like I said, with these, now that they've got the holes in them, after a few months, once they reach the tops of these containers, they've still got a few inches or so, an inch or so to go. Once they reach the tops of these containers, the lids can come off. The plants can be hardened. We'll be into winter by then. So over the winter period, they'll get hardened off, which means just not having their lids on, and then continue to be watered normally. And then come spring, they'll be ready to move out to the greenhouse or towards sort of the end of winter. Okay, so that brings us on to the species, this species, Halaism. Now what I'm going to do, these ones have been toughened up. Now they were planted back in February of 21, so they're a year old. Now what, I know they're tiny, hey. So they grow on a stolon, as you can see. They do have that little stolon already forming, and they have been already hardened. I'm not going to put them outside yet, they're just too fine, but I will pot them all on individually again in the same mix that I always use, doing exactly the same process that I've always done, by simply separating them, giving them enough growing space themselves. But this time they won't be getting their lids put on them. Now, unlike the Elcants with the Neoregelia, their root system is a little bit deeper, and so plucking them out you know, the likelihood is I'm going to break them off or damage their roots. So that's where your tool will come in to help lever them. Now this particular batch here, which is a nice big clump, will actually get rinsed in some water to break them up so that I can successfully pot them without damaging their roots. So once again, they've all been plucked out. A little bit of water. No lids going on these time. As you can see, they're already over the height, the top of the lids anyway. So they're ready to go on the shelf as is. They'll just need more frequent watering. But they're near Regelia, they grow on the stolon, so therefore technically they shouldn't need as much water as some of these other little varieties that we're about to work on. Okay, typical Neoregelias. These are actually a giant form. This is a blood transfusion birds and bees hybrid. So what's that mean? It just simply means that the seed out of an entire seed had developed 5 ripe seeds, and those 5 ripe seeds is what I've planted. So I only got a few seeds from each one from red transfusion. So I just want to grow them all to see how they grow, and we'll see how they go. So these ones I do use the dibble because I don't want to disturb their roots at all. So they simply come across into the mix and I simply give them a tap down. Now remembering that in the wild, near Regelias or any Bromeliad, the birds will disperse their seeds and then the seeds will usually be deposited on tree branches or rock faces, etc. And so they're not going to get all this attention that we're giving them doing it this way, but what we're doing is giving them every opportunity to continue to grow healthy, strong seedlings, and to create hybrids. If we don't do this, if there's people that don't do this, then eventually with the borders being closed and the importing bans occurring when it comes to transporting and importing, exporting plants, we won't end up with any new hybrids, and eventually all of us older growers, us older growers and those that are hybridizing, if we don't teach these techniques to the next generation that's got an interest in growing them this way and making their own hybrids, well, there just won't be any. So that's why the group was originally created, to try to introduce hybridization, seed raising, and then following on everyone's progress over years and seeing how each person response is and how successful they are, and then seeing some of those seedlings week after week growing. It's been quite inspiring and motivating to keep people doing it. At one point we had a really large seed bank that I would provide the seeds for everybody. Seeds would be sent to me, etc. That's sort of fallen away at the moment due to time restrictions. Also, there was a lot of hybrids in the seed bank, which wasn't very well received. So instead of offering hybrids, it's generally just species instead. And the hybrids I tend to grow myself. Okay, all done. Nicely spaced out. Simply misting. Now, please don't over-fertilise using products like your Osmocoats and things like that on your seedlings. They will burn them at this stage, which is why I use the high-grow hydroponic peat, cocoa peat pre-made fibre. It contains the nutrients for seedlings, so it's not so damaging on the young seedlings as they grow. Very easy to over fertilize them, and then that will then cause them to burn off, and you'll lose them all very slowly, but you will lose them all. More Neoregelias, I've already shown them to you, so I won't do any more. These ones are a different form, however, and there are some variegated ones in amongst this section. There's only a few. They're the ones that I particularly want, so I'm going to put those into one container, and all the others, there's another one there, all the others I'll just pop into a different container. There was a lot more variegation when they were very young, but we seem to have lost it now. So I'm going to grow them for, sometimes it takes a couple of leaves. There's another one there. It takes a couple of leaves before they start to show their variegation. What I do have here is some Varesia. Now, once again, these are seeds that I've grown out in the gardens. This is not on my own. Varesia, it's rose blush open pollinated, and what I'm going to do is they were planted in around October, 14th of October, so that's exactly 4 months ago. What I'm going to do is purely separate these now, and not going to do them as individuals. I find Varesias this size individually don't like it. That's me. I mean, I know there are some people out there that do them differently, but what I'm going to do is do them into small clumps of 4 or 5, and I'm going to grow them as community little clumps until they get a lot larger than what they are now. Now, Varesia seeds are grown with a sail, and there you go, just like Tillandsias, they come out in large sections. They just grow along the surface of the substrate before they start to send down their roots, so these just need to be divided up. Right, so they've all been done. So this only takes a matter of a couple of minutes. So I've ended up with 3 containers of my rose blush hybrid that's grown in the garden. Now I anticipate 50% loss over the full time, and then once they've matured years later, remembering we're playing the long game, folks, this doesn't happen overnight, so in several years time these can stay in these pots. As you know, they've got the holes in the bottom of them. They can stay in these pots and continue just to be fed foliage fertilizer or topped up with some exact later on, but not now, not until they really do start to mature and start to fill these pots with their roots. Good thing about these containers is you can check underneath them at their root system to see when they're ready to be potted on, and then easily able to be divided now that they've been spaced. Now I think that's pretty much all of the seedlings in the area that are going on to the windowsill, except, as I said, these last near Regelia, which I'll do off camera. Now we're towards the end of February, middle of February, which means we're going to be coming into winter soon. So these plants currently will still remain on the windowsill, which is that's east, so it's sort of a northeast facing windowsill. Gets no direct sun, but it does get plenty of warmth at this time of year. And then in winter, what will happen is the windowsills will be closed and the plants will remain indoors in the hydroponic room to stay warm until they're ready to go outside because of our really low winter temperatures here. Alright, that's me for the day. That's a little bit of information on potting up your different seedlings. Be sure to put your dates on. Be sure to continue to use the correct formulas when you're writing out your hybrids. If you don't know what it is, then it's a cross ? If you do know what the hybrid is, obviously you write your hybrids down and you continue to write those hybrids onto your plants until you've reached maturity. And when it's time to disperse those plants, name each plant and try not to send Grexes out to confuse the market any more than it already is. Thanks very much for your time. Bye now.